Hi, everybody. Hey, Farhan, you want to go to the next slide? There we go. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm a senior engagement manager with Sense Corp. I've been with the company for uh, almost 2 years. I've really been in delivery and implementation on both business and technology for, well, really going back to before Y2K. So that dates me a little bit. I know my picture probably dates me even more. Um, I've worked in a lot in healthcare and financial services, manufacturing, banking, and really worked with a number of different technologies. And over my career, I've really found that all roads kind of go back to data, and that's how I ended up with Sense Corp and working on data quality and master data management projects using Informatica. And I'm presenting today with my friend and colleague Farhan Sabzali. Farhan and I have been working on projects together at Sense Corp and doing presentations around the country. I know he's a little nervous today. Generally speaking, we're in the same room, and he's able to throw something at me if I go off script at all. And he's about 1,200 miles away right now, so he can't do that. So. Farhan, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself.
Great, thanks, Bob. So my name is Farhan Sabzali. I've been with Sense Corp just about 4.5 years now, but involved with data and data analytics for just about 20 years in different capacities, from data analyst to DBA to architect. And last 5+ years have been solely focused on master data management and data governance practice using Informatica Tools. So looking forward to talking to all of you about the Data Initiative. And with that, Bob, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide here.
Awesome. So on my desk right now, I've got a bottle of water, and it's one of those things that I think we all have all the time. And this one's a bottle of Aquafina. It just came out of the fridge, so it looks really inviting, and it's kind of the bottle's getting some condensation on it. And I'm just gonna see if you can hear if this comes through or not. Let me just be quiet for a second. So hopefully that sound came through, and that was just kind of opening the bottle itself, and all of us have done that a million times. There's a little ring below the cap that when you turn that cap and open up that bottle, you hear that click, and that click basically tells you that this particular bottle is a bottle of Aquafina, that the company behind Aquafina stands behind that bottle and what's in it, and they've essentially said that water is clean and potable and it's safe to drink. We use an analogy around water at Sense Corp, and really our Clean Data Initiative is all about that analogy. One of the things that makes it really powerful is if you ever think about that click, and when you open a bottle of water, if you picked up a bottle and there wasn't that click, it might look perfect. It might be completely clear. It might not have any smell at all, but still without that click, you don't know really what's in it. There can be things in it that could hurt you that you can't see or smell. And we think of data in that same way. It's something that it's part of every company now, and we have to recognize that there is potential of something in that data that can hurt you, just like there could be something in water. And if you think about it at home, we're using that water for our family, for ourselves. We're cooking with it, we're drinking it. It's coming out of that tap, and we're trusting that water is good. This is why this analogy gets so powerful, because companies are doing the same thing with data. Your executives are making decisions about what the company's going to do. Your operations groups are consuming the data into their operations, and they're assuming that it's good. They're assuming that they're processes have been put into place to make sure that it's good. And that's really what our analogy is all about. So this problem of bad data, and we tend to say bad data equals bad everything because it just is so pervasive within every company. And we give some numbers on this slide that I think are used often to justify project spend in this category. But the thing that I really kind of gravitate to here is this 1, 10, 100 idea and that pyramid. And we talk about that a lot, the 1, 10, 100. So from a data perspective, if you think about, let's say a data element like a phone number, getting the right phone number up front, having a process in place to make sure that the people who are gathering your data or entering your data, it might even be the customer themselves entering their data, making sure that you get a phone number, potentially even verifying a phone number. Maybe it's a cell phone number and you're verifying it. Doing that work up front is represented by $1 worth of spend for your company. Going back later and finding that that phone number doesn't exist and trying to fill it in, that represents about $10 worth of work for your company. But leaving that phone number unverified or not filled in, and then getting to the point where, let's say we have an AR issue, you have an invoice that's aged over 90 days, you need to get in touch with that client, and your AR department now goes to their data, and the phone number doesn't exist. And now the impact on the company, we're saying, is going to end up being $100 worth of spend. And that 1, 10, 100, just as a representation of what goes into our data elements as we're building them out, is just a really important concept for us. It represents that if we are doing that work up front, if we're setting up the processes, if we're setting up the systems to succeed at that, we're ultimately saving the company from a great deal of spend. So in the middle of this Venn diagram, we see the certified data, and this is something we talk about a lot, in getting to certified data and staying with certified data, and these pillars that kind of go around that. The first one being data governance, and the importance of data governance, really that idea that we're able to say, here's what the correct data element should be, this is what our policies and standards are around data, and then being able to keep those elements in line and being able to hold people accountable for keeping those elements in line. And I'll let Farhan kind of take the rest of these.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So again, I think one of the key points that I want to highlight here is the confusion around the words data governance, master data management, data quality management, or reference data management. At times, they all get mixed up as one or as synonymous to one another. And our focus here is to make sure that we understand them as individual areas of focus or individual programs that need to be established, that need to be worked on by the teams. Now, again, they may be tied together, they may be sort of interdependent, or they may be worked on in parallel. But we have to make sure that we are focusing on the data quality side at the same time as we're focusing on master data management, or we're focusing on reference data management at the same time as we're focusing on establishing a data governance practice. And this is where Informatica as a company comes into play. And the tools that they have, the products that they have, start to help us really facilitate that discussion, facilitate that program that we're trying to focus on. So as I go to the next slide, what I'm going to focus on are the applications or the products that are available from Informatica. So starting from the left-hand side, we're looking at data quality management. Most of you have heard of IDQ, or Informatica Data Quality Tool, that allows us to profile the data at source, so you can exactly see what type of, not only the metadata, but the quality of the data that's available. you can then create and manage rules. It comes with over 500 rules out of the box, but you can then add your own rules to, again, evaluate the quality of the data and then build the scorecards using those to say, how is my data changing over time? And because IDQ does have the capability of moving the data, whether in an ETL fashion or ELT fashion, you can use the mapping capability and the same rules and scorecards that you created to facilitate that transfer of data from source to target. And then looking at the tools on the data governance side, most of you have heard of Axon as the acquisition that Informatica did a couple of years ago. It's a user interface that allows you to manage the rules, the policies, the processes that come with the data governance practice. And the beauty of the tool is that it can then plug into Enterprise Data Catalog, which is a powerful IDQ that allows to automate some of the work that you do in profiling and scorecarding of the data. EDC also allows you to have a Google-like glossary search where you can look at metadata, look at your data lineage, and see how your data is actually being moved from source to target within your organization. And obviously, again, IDQ, the same tool that we talked about in data quality management, can also be used to establish some of the data governance policy as you start to set up the data quality rules and regulations. As we come down to master data management,
Farhan, I'm gonna interrupt you. We made it to slide 8, which I think is a record for us. But
that's right.
Just to kind of level set, we wouldn't be saying that these are the only tools available or the only tools that we work with for this. Data governance obviously often is worked with SharePoint or even Excel or Word, but Informatica is one of the few tool sets that really goes across all of these spectrums and does it really well. I think if you look at Gartner, they essentially, all of these tools are in the best quadrant they can be in, and these are ones that we've actually used as a whole tool set before, and we've used them as individual tools, but it's a very powerful tool set, but it's not the only way to implement some of these, and we've worked with some of the Informatica competitors as well, but we wanted to focus today mostly on the Informatica tool set, but just so people know, we're not saying this is the only way to do data governance.
That's right. Yeah, and I think the additional point as well is we're not getting into the demos of these tools or how these tools work individually or together. But again, in the Clean Data Initiative piece, we wanted to make sure that we're able to highlight how the different tools fit into this narrative that we're talking about and the processes that we're going to start talking through here. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
We're not going to get into the demo today, but we will have some subsequent webinars. I think we already have one scheduled for Axon coming up in August. And
that's right.
We do have a really great demo environment that we can go in and kind of click through and show people. So we will be following up with those later on, but today we're going to stay at a little bit higher level.
Perfect. All right, so heading back to talking through about just the different tools here. And again, most of you are familiar with these tools. If for some of you who are new to Informatica or just learning about different tools, I just want to stay at the very high level of these applications and the products from Informatica. So within master data management, you have really two sets of options. One is your multi-domain edition or MDE options that comes with basically the blank slate, and you can then have accelerators for healthcare, for retail models and things like that, that allow you to create the data model and the user interfaces that fit your need. And that, again, is where most of our projects are focused on in helping the team build those data models with match and merge and survivor shared rules while integrating the data quality components in that. But the second piece around master data management are your individual 360 products. Again, some of you may have heard of Customer 360, Supplier 360, Product 360. And these are applications that are end-to-end applications ready the moment they are installed with the interface, with the plethora of the attributes that they have collected over time to say, if you're talking about customer, these are the 200 attributes that you may want to collect. And obviously you have the flexibility to go in and turn off and add more attributes and so forth. But immediately from a go-to-market perspective, you're able to get started with an end-to-end application that allows you to manage customer information versus the MDE that is very customized and it's for your need that you're building the model for. Now, similarly, one could argue that Reference 360 also fits into master data management, but in our point of view and in our Clean Data Initiative perspective, we put reference data management as its own exercise because we feel that it deserves that extra attention and deserves that program level support where people are actually managing and setting up the best practices around creating the reference data, whether it's again through a Reference 360 product or through an accelerator that uses MDE as the base. Now, again, this is where we're going to keep the information for now, but as we go through the rest of the presentation, I'll be referring to these tools, and Bob will also be talking through on these points. So
where I live, our water actually comes from the Mississippi River. And Farhan, you know what the nickname for the Mississippi River is?
I don't.
It's the Big Muddy. And if you think about that water source, and when you go down to the Mississippi here, you look, it literally is so thick you can't see through it. It's not necessarily polluted. It's just full of stuff that makes it so you can't see through it. Somewhere between my tap, when I turn on the water in my house, and the Big Muddy, that water gets made potable. It gets made clean. Our water here is awesome, but it has to go through a process to get there. And that's really where we start to bring this analogy together with data. All of these things that the city and the state are going through to get that water ready, all of the processes and machines that they use, the state that sets, state and federal government that sets how much of what can be in my water, all of that stuff happens between that source and my tap. And so as Farhan goes through this, it's tying that analogy back then to the Informatica products.
That's right. And again, the idea here is similar to that. Every single tool, whether again it's Informatica or others, are serving a purpose in making sure your data is clean. So whether it's checking the quality of the data or making sure that reference data is managed together, or whether it's matching and merging some of the duplicated data across your different systems, all those are individual purposes, individual programs that you're working on to make sure that the quality of data at the end, whether it's being consumed by an application or by an analytical tool, whether it's a reporting tool or a data scientist using it for figuring out the analysis that they're working on, it's trusted and it's clean data.
So we're going to talk through two. These are actual customer implementations that Sense Corp has done, and really these were both cases where we came in at the very beginning, helped them with their kind of strategy and roadmap behind getting to a point where they had certified data, and then helped them implement a number of the Informatica tools along the way to help them get it stood up. Our first case study is really a company that supplies building materials and does that across the U.S. it seems like on the outside that might be a fairly simple business, buying and selling lumber or other supplies. But within that is all of the logistics and all of the costs that go into moving material and supplying material, the very complex nature of their customer base, which is often fairly transient in nature. They work for a builder might be a builder on one site, and on another site he's a subcontractor, or she may be working on a site one day for a builder, and the next site she's the actual general contractor on it. So within their data, there are a lot of different pieces that they work on, both from the vendor and customer side, but then also their employees, their location data, and one of their big ones is really their product, which can both have a manufacturing side and a resale side.
Right. And then the second case study is around a public sector, one of the largest state health and human services department, where they manage the member data of just about 250 million members, just about 500,000 providers, both individual and organizations, and how they use this process of not only identifying the best version of the truth or the golden record of those members and providers, but being able to trust the information from the multi systems that they have, where the data comes in and gets analyzed and used throughout the cycle. So as we continue, we'll keep referring to these, and you will see same icon of a building or a medical sample on those slides, so you can refer back to which case study we're talking about.
So we think about this whole process, and really the key call out for us here is that there is some level of organizational change management that's required. We're building out a data governance group, data quality, master data management groups. These are real people who have jobs around this. It may be that it's just part of their job, but we really are building out an organization. And I like to usually talk to people that maybe don't have data governance within their company about whether or not they'd ever create a contract without their legal department looking at it, or put out a press release without their compliance department looking at it. And the answer is always no. People accept that legal and compliance are important parts of the organization, but they haven't always looked at data governance that way. And that's how we really look at data governance. It can be different for different companies, but it is a real part of the organization. And if you're reporting data, if you're making decisions off of data, it's one that can't be overlooked. So if you want to go to the next slide, Farhan, this is basically our process around data governance. The key thing here is there is a process to it. You can just say we have some policies and standards, and so we have data governance, but really having it come from the executive level, from that C level that sets a strategy and a vision, that's what gives it that teeth, that makes it like a legal or compliance department. Getting the right org structure, and this can be different for different companies, but making sure that it's the one that fits your company. Having people understand what they're supposed to do within that org structure. And then we look at the policies and procedures, and really those are the standards and policies. So the one that fits to our analogy, how much lead can be in your water? We know that you can't see it, you can't smell it. It's not going to hurt you the second you take a sip out of it, but over time it does hurt you. And setting that level of lead that the government says is acceptable within the water, because everybody's water is going to have some in it, is kind of what data governance does with their standards and policies, to say this is what we tolerate for our data. And then if you notice that we're all the way to step 5, and now we're talking about technology, governance isn't always a technology play, and technology can enable it, can help it, but there is still a lot of work that's more on the business side. And this is where a lot of the data work and getting to that certified data, it's not just a business play, it's not just a technology play. It does require the entire company, and it does require both sides of the company, the business side and the technology side. And then finally, setting up measure and audit, and this is a place where Informatica does a great job of being able to give us dashboards, and that's about holding people accountable. So we've fixed the data, we've got it clean. How do we keep it there, and how do we report on that? How do we show people that we're getting better, we're getting worse, and whether that's at a low level with our stewards and our custodians, or whether that's at a high level with our executives and our domain owners, we're able to show them how we're doing, and we're able to have a dashboard that's very simple, that's very clean and straightforward, that says, here's where the quality of the data is today. So as we go forward and we look at governance structures, and we're really looking for what works within a company, what's the correct way to set it up for your company. Anybody who says there's a cookie cutter and this is how data governance always works, it just isn't like that. It's a hard thing to stand up. It's a hard thing to get ingrained into a company, that there's this new group. We don't want to come in and create bureaucracy, but we do want to have an effective way to make sure that your data is certified and good. So we have a couple examples. The first example is from our building. So Farhan, if you go to the next slide.
Hey, Bob, I think at this point I wanted to do a poll to see how many of the participants that are on the call actually have a data governance organization. I think if we can launch that, there you go. So awesome. as we talk through the few examples here, hopefully people can participate and share their experience today within their organization.
Awesome, thanks, Farhan.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
So the consulting model at the first company, essentially, this is a little bit of a hybrid of the consulting model, because they don't really have a chargeback necessarily. But what we're looking at is that we have domain owners who are very close to the domain itself. So take, for example, customer or vendor or product. It's a person within the organization at a senior level who really does have a pretty tight connection to that area, that expertise. And then within that, they've got that divided out. So there's data stewards who are even closer to the entry point in the data, and all the way down to data custodians that are really the people who are touching the data. They're the people who'd be accountable for approving a match and merge or an update to a data element. So those are the people actually touching the keyboard and fixing the data. And in the middle, you've got the data governance office, which is helping to set those standards and really showing the data owners where they're at from their accountability standpoint. So they're giving dashboards to the data owners. They're supplying information and policies and standards out to the stewards. They're working to build out the requirements for data elements, but they're not directly responsible for it, but they're helping to govern it. And if you go to the next slide, you're going to see now in this federated model, which worked really well for the public sector. I like to think of this almost as our federal government and our state governments, and then our local municipality governments, sorry. Where in the middle, where we've got the governance office, they're really setting those standards. So they're saying, here's the speed limit, here's the amount of lead that can be in the water. The states have some leeway within that to add to that, to change that. And these are the different agencies within this particular part of the state. So, for instance, the middle might be HHS, the Health and Human Services area, and then the agency might be one of the Medicaid or Medicare groups. And then within their group, they're kind of setting that overall standard and then farming that out to the agency DG office, which is going to be very close to where the data is actually owned, and working with the stewards from there. So it's a model, this particular model worked very well for them in the way that they were able to maintain their individual control of their data elements. And it's not necessarily across domains here, but it's across more sectors of their group.
So Bob, just FYI, on the first poll, just about 50% of the participants said that they have a data governance organization today. So it's impressive that we do have that presence. But again, I think if we are able to have a conversation with them, I'm curious to learn about which model that they are following today of these 5 that are shown.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I don't think we've gotten that high of a level in many of our live conversations. Usually
That's
it's
right.
probably closer to 25%.
That's right.
And I think where that gets interesting too is where they place if they do have a chief data officer or someone in that type of role, whether they place them in technology or whether they place them in more of a business side, or even a hybrid where they report directly up to the C-level. It's an interesting piece of implementing this at any organization to find that structure that works, and that really comes in that one of those first steps where we're working with the C-level to put together the vision. But that's interesting that we have that many. That's awesome. Hopefully those areas are clicking along and are able to keep their data in check. So Dilbert's going to raise his head here. And Dilbert always kind of cuts pretty close for most of us in the business world, that kind of making light of what we deal with every day. This first really driver of dirty data, and a lot of times we almost, when we present this live, it almost becomes like a support group, because everybody has some of these issues. Companies, it's the nature of business that you're going to end up with problematic data. One of the reasons we grow through acquisitions and mergers, and you inherit other systems. They don't always convert perfectly. Sometimes you're inheriting somebody else's merger acquisition work that happened long ago. You've got disparate systems working on the same thing, and in the end, what you're ending up with is data that doesn't quite make sense. And one of the things we like to tell people is it's okay to say, hey, we've got this problem, and here's how we got there, but now here's what we're going to do to get out of it. And this first one is a great story. Hey, we grew, but it's got some pieces to it that can eventually hurt the quality of your data.
Right. So I think this is where our next poll comes in as well. But in continuing the different examples or different case studies of what could cause dirty data would be the decentralized systems, right? How many of you have a decentralized system in your ecosystem? So, or because we would be curious to see what the poll result comes out. But if you think about that, the moment you create a second system or a third system or fourth system that manages your customer data or your vendor data for multiple reasons, whether it was through acquisitions or because there was a different need or different compliance rules or whatever the case was, now you have to maintain some sort of lineage of the data, some sort of trust in those data to make sure that you're not duplicating the data, or you're not addressing the quality of the data as it becomes decentralized, right? So again, it's just one of the driver factors. And as Bob mentioned, the thing that we constantly heard as we talked about this was the idea that this is common, right? Some of the things that we're mentioning here is not unique to clients that we've worked with, but it's common across all the industries, all the different sizes of companies, whether it's small, medium, or large. And it's, again, I guess no surprise that we see that it's 50% of you already recognize that there is a decentralized data in the organization. So welcome to the support group, as we say.
So this one, with not really knowing where to start, it is so much easier to just add a couple people to an AR department, or really anybody on the operations side to just, slowly add a couple people here and there, rather than going back and dealing with the whole issue of our data isn't good. And so it's really hard to get this kind of project started. They're not easy projects to do. They generally go for a long time before you really see the value coming back in. Man, it's worth it in the end, and we get to see that side of it too. But at the beginning of this journey, it's really hard to say, okay, we're gonna get off of the hamster wheel of just adding more people to this, and we're gonna sit down and we're gonna actually plan this out and get a project started. That's a really hard step to take, and you might not see the benefits of it for a year and a half, 2 years, where your operations groups are starting to get relief from some of that bad data, or your management level, your C level is starting to make decisions off of analytics that they can really trust. But it's worth it, but it's really is hard to determine exactly where do I start.
Yeah. And I think the next sort of tied in point is around the priority, right? That it may be a compliance issue that starts the project, or a business case that comes out of anything but data and analytics, right? That it's not a priority to improve the data, or it's not a priority to improve the analytics of that data that's going on. So how do we make sure that we make that business case, or we make that, again, the example that we used earlier of the 110-100 rule, of showing the value of investing the time upfront in improving the data quality, or working on that data analytics piece that may be $10 versus the $100 that it costs us if we don't improve that analytics. Right?
So this is kind of a funny one, because we're talking about Informatica in this, and really the idea that this is just purely technology. It's not. There is a lot of work, but it's not just technology work. This isn't just put a system in, whether it's Informatica or any system, and flip a switch and all of a sudden you have clean data. It really does require a partnership between business and technology. It requires an understanding of the business context around data, not only what the data means, but how it's being used throughout the organization. It requires work on the operations side. It is a difficult project to do. It's impossible if you think you can just roll out technology and go, because you're not going to get to the point where you really can trust your data. You're just going to have another system to support. And that's one of our key, I think, messages in this whole thing, is that technology is an enabler here, but it's not the end of the story. It does require quite a bit of business input and business involvement in any project to get this going.
Perfect. So just like Bob covered the data governance process, one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is, again, our approach to data quality program. As I mentioned, each one of the things that we talked about earlier, from data governance to data quality to master data management to reference data management, each one of them is considered and should be considered as a program, and thus has individual steps and a continuous process that kind of starts and continues over time as you mature that organization. So again, what we are highlighting here is the Sense Corp Clean Data Initiative approach to data quality program, where you start with you're setting not only profiling, but also setting up some benchmarks that you're working towards or working with, and then building on top of that. Once you profile the data, once you identify some of the rules, you start to then again use those rules to help you drive improvement. So you may be at 50% blank data today or null data today that you want to reduce it down to 25%. That information only comes from being able to profile and being able to set those goals, and then starting to identify additional rules. Once you start to get the data in, now that you have actual data coming through, you've got your data down to, let's say, 25%. Now you're looking at that data to say, what can I do to improve that? It may be that I want to make sure that if it's a credit limit type information, that it's between certain start and end point to make sure that it complies with what we consider good data. And using that information again over time to continue to make changes, continue to make those targeted, whether it's process changes, whether it's people training issues, or whether it's technology implementations that you're doing, to make sure that it's a cyclical process that allows you to continue to improve and continue to improve not only the quality of the data, but also the maintenance of the data. So I think this is where we're going to go ahead and do the last poll here and see what type of programs are you guys implementing today around data quality.
And while you do that, Farhan, I just want to kind of chime in. One of the things about IDQ as a tool and really this part of Informatica's technology is this tool in the hands of a business analyst, whether you're in the middle of a clean data initiative or whether it's something else, but being able to profile the data it's such a powerful thing. And we've seen our business analysts and their ability to go really fast through data profiling and turn that into meaningful analysis is just a part of IDQ that's just so powerful. If you already have this tool and you're not using it for profiling, you're really missing out, because it's a big thing, and we're able to do things that years ago would have required us coding SQL and other things for months, and now we can do it in minutes with a business analyst, which is really powerful.
All right, so I'm going to share some examples, again, referring back to our case studies that we mentioned earlier. Again, when we're looking at the poll data, it's interesting that this has, again, highest number of, it shows that about 67% of you have either are implementing or about to start implementing a data analytics initiative, which is amazing. And again, kind of builds on the same theme that we saw with data governance practice. And unfortunately, when we were talking to different individual groups and our roadshows, we have never seen it about 25-30%, as Bob mentioned earlier. So this is great that the participants that are on this call are already on the journey. And hopefully some of the processes and examples that we're talking about here will help you in that journey and accelerate that experience for you. So going back to the examples and the case studies, again, what I'm going to focus on over the next few slides is not to get into the technical pieces, but just show the complexities around the different domains, right? The idea of what is a customer can mean multitude of different definitions depending on who you talk to. So from accounting to shipping to sales, they may have different definition of a customer, and each definition then relates to each other. So individually, that may be the same person, but they're perceived differently from different departments. And what this model is just showing you is how in this one case study, we have 5 different definitions of customer, 2 different definitions of vendor, kind of relating to each other with employee and location as a data model. From a data flow perspective, again, this example here is showing you how we take the data how there are different technologies involved in pulling the data from the source systems, like in this case of Kafka, bringing the data into a data lake, and then using SQL Server SSIS practices to move the data from data lake into a operational data store or ODS. And then using the Informatica tools from that point forward to build the data quality standards, to build the ETL, move the data into the MDM hub, doing the match and merge, building the best version of the truth and surviving that data, and then giving the data governance team and the business a interface, whether it's to manage the reference data through IDD or through the master data application through IDD, and allowing them to be able to see that master data and manage the reference data. And once that's done, sending that data back to the data lake so that way it can be used and through the flow of the data into your data mart. So again, it's not interrupting your day-to-day operation, but being able to take the data and make sure that it remains clean and remains pristine to a point where you can actually trust the data into your analytical solution.
Well, and even beyond that, at that customer, we really went from a place where data was something you had to deal with to data being an asset. And now they have this operational data store that really they can trust the data. They can start to build solutions based on trusted data rather than having to attach them to source systems, which were not always trusted. And it's just a whole new way of doing business now that we've got data as an asset rather than data as something you have to deal with.
Perfect. Yeah, so I mean, again, this second case study that we talked about, again, may sound simple, but being able to come to a definition of what a member is, what a provider is, and then distinguishing between a provider individual and provider organization, and how, again, they relate to each other is a key definition, is a key business analytics exercise that we go through to be able to align everyone that's involved in not only the data governance side, but data quality, master data, and reference data cycle to make sure that business and IT agree on what that definition is and use that to build the data flow again, which looks a little bit similar to the other flow. If you notice, it's really about pulling the data in from the sources into the staging environment. You may not have the data lake, you may not have the ODS, or you may not even have the data mart at this point, but being able to consume the data from the source systems and matching and merging and sending back the master data back to the operational systems gives you the ability to say when every customer walks in, or especially in this case, a member walks into the hospital, you know exactly who that member is. Or when a provider sends their bill, you know exactly which member that they had treated or which account that they were treated under, because now you have that best version of the truth or the golden record of that individual available to you. And again, in the next demo, in the next webinar, when we get into the technical side of this thing, this is where we could focus on the different components that are involved of the data movement, of the different tools that, again, Informatica provides to facilitate this discussion here.
And, you know, finally, for us, this is something that we do on a regular basis. And we just wanted to basically say that there is some unique methodology that goes along with this type of project to really set it up for success. And we've been working on this for a long time. And just like Informatica has grown and changed from really being, you know, kind of power center and a place to move data to really that full suite. We've changed with that over the last 20 years. We've worked on projects and developed a methodology that works for this type of project. And it is a little bit different. And it is different at every client as well, you know, mixing in some things like agile and iterative development now. But really we do have a methodology that's kind of tried and true.
Yeah, and similar to MDM project itself, besides the project management side of things, is having a methodology that's proven in different industries, in different size of companies, being able to come to you at your client side and saying, This is a proven methodology that we can come in and adapt to your needs. So when we say that we're going to do data analysis and then we're going to start doing requirements, you know exactly what's involved and what are the steps, what tools we would use, what are the standards we would use. And then when we take the requirement and start building the design, again, you have a clear understanding of what that means. So it's not ambiguous, it's not vague. We have a specific milestones around each of these individual steps here that we can then, again, come in and adapt to your needs and talk about whether investing a lot more time, a lot more areas, building those artifacts, or adjusting it to make sure that we go through them, but making sure that we check that box to build that artifact that can be used later on in the whether it's in development, testing, or especially when the system is live, being able to train the users on those things. Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been fun for Farhan and I to get out into the country and talk to people about this, and talking to everybody online today has been great. We had last year, our consultant excellence group and our marketing group came out and really talked to the practitioners, talked to the people who are out in the field doing the work for Sense Corp. And they brought that back, and they took and made this analogy around clean water, which I love to talk about because everybody gets it. And it's easy to connect back to data and what companies are doing with data. They put it into the form of an ebook. It's a great book. Most of the slides that you saw today come from our ebook. It really comes from 20 years of experience working with this stuff. We focus today on Informatica. The ebook does not. The ebook is a little bit more generic about technology. Farhan, do you know what they charge for the ebook?
It's free.
It's free? You're kidding me. That's awesome. You can go out and download the ebook. We encourage you to do so. If you're in the middle of a project, if you're just thinking about a project, or you've completed a project, there's stuff in there that you'll like to see. We just kind of dipped our feet in it today, but you can dive right into the whole book. And just, again, thank you for joining us today. It's been fun for Farhan and I to get a chance to talk to you all. And I was fairly nice to you today, Farhan.
That's right. That's right. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll pass it back to Kelly.
All right, so we do have just a couple of minutes left for Q&A. If anybody has any questions and wants to type them into the chat box or the question and answer box, I'm going to wait just a few minutes and see if we have any pop up. Okay, I do see one here, and I'm going to read it for you. We have our governance running in SharePoint. Do we need Informatica Axon? If so, why?
I'll take the first part of that, and then Farhan, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay.
Do you need to? Maybe. Again, now, if you're working on SharePoint or Excel, and it's working great for your company, everything is good. Maybe not. There is a certain amount of technology overkill that can happen here, but at the same time, I think for most people, getting the governance to the point where it's actually you're able to get those policies and standards and really govern them through rules and not have to build out specific queries or build custom dashboards. That's where I think it gets to be really powerful. So I'll pass that over to you, Farhan.
Yeah, so I think the answer really is it depends. And I know Bob loves that every time I say that.
You answer every question I ask you with "it depends." So
that's right. So, I think in reality, depending on what is it that you're facing the challenge with today's implementation in SharePoint, or how you plan to use the data governance policies, that's where we can come in and help you make that determination to see that, yes, having Informatica Axon, for example, will address the challenges that you're facing with adoption today. Or by having Axon in partnership with IDQ or in partnership with EDC, you'll be able to address some of the needs or some of the goals that you have of maturing the data governance practice. So we can help you drive through that answer by understanding exactly what you're facing today and what your goals are. But again, Axon, it's another tool. So without the processes and the trained people around it, it will just remain a technology tool set that may not serve its purpose.
Okay, one more question here, and I know we're running close to 2 o'clock, so we'll get through this one question. If you have only 1 or 2 people max to work on a clean data initiative with no budget for tools, where's the best place to start? Does this scenario have any chance for success?
It depends. If you do get started, if you do take and you start to show some value, that's where 1 or 2 people can start to expand. But yes, there's value in it. You don't have budget for tools, so we need to find another way. Not knowing your data or how it's structured, even if all you do is come up with some really low-hanging fruit and some SQL queries to be able to monitor it, you can provide a ton of value to your organization if you find the right things to look at. So yes, you definitely can do it. It's a bummer you don't have budget for tools. It's a bummer you don't have more people, but you can still impact your organization way more than the budget for 1 or 2 people. The impact can be really great. You just have to kind of be really careful about what you're choosing to bite off, and you're not going to boil the ocean with that scenario, but you can hit some really high value data elements. And I would say that's maybe where to start, is where your company is spending the most. I mentioned the AR department earlier, and I've seen AR departments where there's 10 people and all they're doing is trying to chase data elements that are missing, and they're out there trying to find people or organizations and going back to the source and working on that. You can affect it with 1 or 2 people.
Okay, thank you so much, Bob and Farhan. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to remind you that you will be receiving a follow-up email tomorrow that will come from Sense Corp. It's going to include 3 things. One of them, the recording of today's webinar. A second, the link to download the Clean Data Initiative ebook. And third, a link to register for our next webinar, which you see on the screen now. Data governance and Axon, accelerating cultural adoption through collaboration. If you have any questions that weren't able to be answered today, please feel free to reach out to us directly. You could see Bob and Farhan's contact information earlier in the presentation, or feel free to email us at marketing@sensecorp.com. Again, thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.